Okay, now playing against 1400 rated player. So let me play the Caro-Kann as usual. d5. Okay, my opponent didn't take. So then I'm gonna go c5 and undermine the pawn chain. Let's see if my opponent knows this line. Okay, knight f3. I'm probably just simply going to play knight c6. Let's see what is my opponent going to come up with. c3. Okay, extending the pawn chain. Well, in this case, I'm just going to take. And if my opponent retakes with a c-pawn, then I'm gonna go bishop g4. That's a very typical move. Like sometimes in the Caro-Kann you have to go to f5 first because the knight is still on g1 and the bishop on g4 would be hanging. But if you have a choice between putting the bishop on g4 and putting it on f5, always put it on g4. Because it is putting pressure on the knight on f3 that is protecting the pawn on d4. That is the biggest weakness in white's position. It is the base of the pawn chain. So let me just play e6. Now my plan is to play knight e7, knight f5, queen b6, and put a lot of pressure on the pawn on d4. So just simply knight e7. I'm going knight f5, hopefully. Whenever my opponent goes h3, I don't mind taking, because that knight is a really important piece in the defense of the pawn on d4. So now I'm gonna go knight f5 and threaten it to take on d4. After bishop e3, I'm gonna go queen b6, another piece attacking the pawn on d4. So now it is 3 different pieces. And also b2 is hanging. Okay. And in this position, I believe that I can just simply take on d4. I'm debating whether to take with the knight on the f file or c file. And I'm thinking maybe knight c takes d4 might be better, because then I'm still putting some pressure on the bishop on e3. So let me just take with the knight from the c file. Now the biggest tank is to break the pen, but I can always play bishop c5. Okay, so my opponent went bishop g4. That makes some sense. However, I think that I can take on e3. That's why I kept the knight on f5. And now my opponent has an isolated doubled pawn, which is the worst version of a doubled pawn. So now I just drop my knight back, hit the pawn on e5. That is the remaining pawn from the pawn chain that no longer exists. So a big weakness. And the pawn on e3 is also hanging. Okay, my opponent protected the pawn. I can take on e5. I would be 2 pawns up. But maybe I can even go bishop c5 first, attacking the pawn on e3, threatening to win a queen. Okay, my opponent went king h1, and I believe that I can just simply take with the bishop, hitting the queen, and then I'm planning to play bishop d4 and trap the rook. That's exactly what happened. So now I'm winning the rook as well. Okay, happy days. And now probably time to finish my development, right? So let's just play short castle. I'm already an exchange and 2 pawns up. So that's pretty good. So my opponent went knight f3. That makes sense. Stopping any queen d4 business that would hit the rook and the pawn. Also protecting the pawn on e5. Well, what should I do now? I would say f6 would be quite tempting at some point, getting rid of this pawn. However, the pawn on e6 would be hanging. So what am I gonna go for is knight d4. Threatening to take the queen and offering the swap of knights. So my opponent took, I'm taking with my queen. My opponent hit my queen. Okay, well in that case, I'm probably gonna go queen f4. Or queen f4 might be rook f1, repeating moves. I don't really want that. So let me just play queen c3. I always want to keep an eye on the pawn on e5. Bishop f3. Okay, let me just play rook c8, develop my rook. Now I'm planning to go queen c2. Exchange queens, swap off everything, and just win. Okay, my opponent went for this. I might actually just simply triple up on the c file. So now I'm planning to play rook fc8. So I have really good control over the c file. Okay, my opponent went rook d3. So in this case, I'm just simply going to play queen c1, threatening to go queen f4 check, which is a bit annoying. And rook c2 is almost always an idea. Well, in this case, I'm gonna go queen f4 check, provoking white to play the move g3. That is weakening the second rank. So now I can play queen f5, threatening to go rook c2. Now after this move, I'm gonna play rook c2 anyways, because after bishop takes, I take the queen back with a check, and after king g1, I'm gonna win the bishop. If my opponent goes rook d2, which is the only move that I take, my opponent has to retake and I win another pawn. Okay, this is what happens. And then I took the pawn. I guess in this position I just simply go rook c8, planning to go rook c2. Alright, now when my opponent moves the bishop from the third rank, I can probably play rook c3 and hit the pawn on g3. That is a weakness, but I always have to be careful to not to get checkmated on the 8th rank. Okay, my opponent just simply protected. So, honestly, I'm thinking of just simply playing h6, so I never get checkmated. Then I can probably start marching with my d pawn, because it is a passed pawn. And my opponent resigned.